All right, all right, all right. We live, we live, we live. Floors first, based. We're live. I don't have a lot of time. This is 2 hours and 4 minutes long. We should be able to skip through ads because everybody knows who Jordan Peterson is already. So from Jordan Peterson's channel, we're about to react to. I thought it was the first conversation they've ever had, but I think they might have talked before at some point. Because I think he's saying in the beginning here, it's good to do this again. But Destiny talks a lot of crap about Jordan Peterson on his show. And so this has kind of been long awaited. So we're going to record it and see if this clip maker can make some clips out of it afterwards. That way it saves me work. So let me start that. We're already recording. All right. Let's get into it.
Hello, everyone.
Oh,
I'm
that's
pleased to
loud.
announce my new tour for 2024.
2024.
Beginning in early February and running through June. Tammy and I, an assortment.
All right, no offense, Jordan, JP, but we're gonna have to skip through your stuff. We know about your tour, those who wrestle with God.
My forthcoming. Looking forward to this. I'm thrilled to be able to do it again. And
when you look at like the fall of the Soviet Union, or you look at the failure of like socialist or communist regimes, I don't know if the issue there was so much redistribution.
that was one of many issues.
I don't think it was an issue
I don't really want to watch the intro.
at all. I think that
Hello, everyone. I'm
Here we
here
go.
today talking to Stephen Bunnell, known professionally and online as Destiny. He's an American streamer, debater, and political commentator. He really came to my attention, I would say, as a consequence of the discussion he had with Ben Shapiro and Lex Friedman. And I decided to talk to him, not least because it's not that easy to bring people who are identified, at least to some degree, with the political beliefs
Look at his
on the left
outfit.
into a studio where I can actually
Look
have
at
a
his
conversation with
jacket.
them.
It's like a
I've tried
one-piece
that
jacket.
more often than you might think. And it happens now and then, but not very often. So today we talk a lot about, well, the differences between the left and the right and the dangers of political ideology per se and the use of power as opposed to invitation and all sorts of other often heated and contentious issues. And so you're welcome to join us. And I was happy to have the opportunity to do this. So I guess we might as well start by letting the people who don't know who you are get to know who you are with a little bit more precision. So why have you become known and how has that developed?
it's a pretty broad question. I think I started streaming around 15 years ago when it wasn't really a thing yet. There were a few people that did it. I started early on. I guess back then you weren't a professional gamer yet because the game had just started to come out, but there was a game called StarCraft 2, and I streamed myself playing that game. I was a pretty good player. It was pretty entertaining to watch, and then I kind of grew over, I guess maybe the next 7 years, just streaming that people would watch.
Streaming on YouTube?
Well, back then I started on a website called Livestream, then I switched to Ustream, then I switched to a site called Justin TV, and then that turned into Twitch.tv. So after streaming there for like 7 or 8 years, I was a semi-professional StarCraft 2 gamer.
Then he got
The game
banned.
kind of came and went, but I had a lot of other interests.
Then he got banned
Around
from,
2016, I started to get
Twitch.
more involved into the world of politics. It's kind of a left-leaning figure because of my background in like esports and internet gaming and internet trash talk. I had more of a kind of like a combative attitude, and that was kind of rare for left-leaning people at the time. So it's basically where my early political popularity came from. I think from like 2016 to 2018 was debating right-wing people.
So was there a game-like element to the debating, do you think? And is that part of why that morphing made sense?
It's competition.
No, I wouldn't say so. I mean, if you get really reductionist, everything in life is kind of a game, but that's not very satisfying. I think I grew up like very argumentative. My mom is from Cuba, so my family was like very conservative. And then I grew up like listening to the news all day, listening to my mom's political opinions all day. And then I argued with kids in high school and everything. And I've always been kind of like an argumentative, type A, aggressive personality. So I think that probably lent itself well to the political stuff in 2016. Yeah.
Was that useful in gaming? That personality?
In some ways, yeah. In some ways, no. I don't know directly for the games itself. I don't know how much it necessarily mattered. But for all the peripheral stuff, in some ways it was really beneficial. I could kind of like cut out my own path and I could...
I can't be pausing a lot and talking because this is 2 hours long. What's up, Bro? What's up, Stephen Will? I used to use Justin TV all the time. I used no way what I used Ustream. I streamed on Ustream. What's up, C Sal? What's Destiny doing there? He's talking to Jordan Peterson. It's crazy. He talks so much crap about Jordan Peterson. All the time he references Jordan Peterson as like insults. So I want to see if this gets combative, if this gets a little heated.
Could be very unique, and I could kind of be on my own. In some ways, it's very detrimental. I can be very difficult to get along with, and I'm very much kind of like, I want to do this thing, and if you try to tell me what to do, I don't want to have like a sponsor or a team or anybody kind of with a leash on me. So, yeah, I guess it worked out.
It's interesting because the temperamental proclivity that you're describing, that's associated with low agreeableness. And generally, well, and that's more combative, it's more stubborn, it's more implacable, it's more competitive. The downside is that it's more skeptical, it can be more cynical, it can be less cooperative. But generally, a temperament like that is not associated with political belief on the left.
Right.
Because the leftists tend to be characterized by...
Because he's not really a lefty.
Higher levels of compassion. And
he's just a sexual deviant.
So, that element of your temperament at least is...
Fuentes has a great video where he talks about how he was talking to people in Destiny's Discord. And he said, all the people that listen to Destiny, like they'll talk to somebody like me. And like we could get along if we were playing a video game or something. Or if we were hanging out, we would get along. He said the only thing is there's a lot of gay and trans people in that community. And that basically the only reason they're on the left is because it starts with a hatred of God or their parents, which leads to a hatred of God. And then that leads to the, all the vices that we get into. And then once they're basically coomers, once they're in love with the sex and they start having sex with everything and his brother and its mama, they completely write out God because they know about God and they know about that side. And that's when you got to really acknowledge your mistakes and try to work towards bettering it. And they don't want to do that. So that's why the only reason they're on the left is because they're sexual deviants. A lot of them, now some of them are socialists. There are commies and socialists and stuff, but they're like people who call themselves center left that are only on that side because they're degenerates.
Quite masculine. And
SE Wolverines.
A lot of the ideology that characterizes the modern left has a much more temperamentally feminine nature. So all right. So why do you think the
Destiny
shift
didn't
from
like
your
that.
popularity to
Destiny didn't like that comment.
Worked? And you said that started about 2016. And why do you think that shift happened for you, like in terms of your interest?
I think I've always been interested in a lot of things. Like I grew up with a very strong political bend. It was conservative until I got into my streaming years, probably 5 or 6 years into streaming. I slowly kind of started to shift to the left. I would say that, I guess in around 2016, when I saw all of the conversations going on with the election and when all the issues being talked about, I felt like the conversations were very low quality. And in my naivety, I thought that maybe I could come in and boost the quality, at least in like my little corner of the internet, to have better conversations about what was going on. And so that was basically my injection point into all of that was, fighting about those political issues.
Thanks,
and then
sir.
arguing with people about them, doing research and reading and all of that. Yeah.
And so did you do that by video to begin with as well?
It wasn't.
It was all streaming. Yeah.
It
wasn't an original point.
I presume you built an
I
audience
stole it.
among the people who were following you as a
But it was
gamer
a good
first,
point.
And then that started to expand. Is that correct?
Basically, yeah. Without getting too much into like the business or streaming side of things, basically, actually, this probably carries over to basically to all media, I would imagine, is you've got people that will watch you for special events. So maybe you're like a commentator of the Super Bowl, or maybe you're hosting like a really huge event. Then you've got people who will watch you every time you're participating in your area of expertise. So for me, that's like a particular game I might be playing. It might be when you're on like a particular show or something that people watch you for. And then the fundamental fan, like the best fan that you're converting to the lowest and most loyal viewer, I guess, is somebody that's watching you basically no matter what you're doing. And these are the people that'll follow you from area to area.
Right.
And I think because of the way I did gaming and I talked about a lot of other stuff, whether it was politics, science, current events, whatever, I had a lot of loyal fans that kind of followed me wherever I went. So quite a few of them stuck in Star
established a
Trek.
reputation.
Yeah.
So how would you characterize your reach now? How would you quantify
Far,
it?
long
I
reach.
think well, can you be more precise?
How many people are watching a typical video that you might produce, and what are you doing?
It usually
for
has like
subscribers,
5,000
say,
live
on YouTube
streamers.
and total. Any idea about total reach?
Yeah, well, I mean,
Live
I
viewers.
guess my subscribers on YouTube, I have around, I think that's around 770,000 on my main channel. I think I probably do between all three channels, I think around 15 to 20 million views a month. And then I live stream to anywhere from 5 to 15,000 concurrent viewers a day for hopefully around 8 hours a day.
Yeah, he's probably making $1 million a month. Plus his kick deal, I heard, was in the high. What did they say? It was six figures. It was low six figures. I think he got like $200K for his kick. I don't know. I don't know the number, but he said six figures, and then they said high or low six figures. I thought he said low six figures, maybe mid six figures, just for his kick deal. So yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So you have quite a substantial reach. And so you said that initially you were more conservative leaning, but that changed. What did it mean that you were more conservative leaning, and how and why did that change?
When I said I was conservative leaning, I mean I was writing articles for my school newspaper defending George Bush and the Iraq War. I was like very much like I think it's like an insult now when people say like neocon, but I was like very much like a conservative, a Bush era conservative. So supported big business, supported traditional, all of the conservative, I guess, like foreign policy, hawkish foreign policy, for whatever that meant as like a 14, 15-year-old.
Comball?
There was the whole Elian Gonzalez incident that was very big for Cuban Americans, where there was a Cuban boy that tried to come to the United States with several other people and his mother, and their raft, I guess, crashed or something happened. I think his mom died and some other people died, and there was a huge debate on whether or not to send him back to Cuba, and Clinton ended up sending him back to Cuba, and I know that my mom was super irritated and all that, to say the least. And then once I hit college, I think I supported Ron Paul in 2008. So I was a big Ron Paul libertarian guy in high school. When I went, I went to a Catholic Jesuit high school, and I kind of became atheist in that process. I started reading Ayn Rand. So I was very, 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 very conservative.
But on the libertarian end, it sounds
I would say so.
And then I got some new, and then he got a little taste of the new, and he became a sexual deviant.
So initially on the
that makes more sense in relationship to your temperament.
Sure, maybe, yeah. Initially it was like Christian conservative, and then it became like libertarian conservative. Without my life kind of took like a wacky path.
Turned against God.
As I started working, I kind of had to drop out of school.
He turned against God.
And
That's
I got
what
into
happened.
streaming. And once I started streaming, I had a son. Basically, around the first year I started streaming. As I started to go through life, and I went from kind of being in this like working poor position to making a lot of money, especially through the lens of my child.
He became
I saw
more
how
socialist.
Different life was when I had more money versus less. And I guess like the differences between what was available to me and then my child as I made more money while I was really wealthy versus not as wealthy, it kind of started to change the way that I guess.
So you got more attuned to the consequences of inequality?
Basically, I would say, yeah.
Okay, and so how did that lead you to develop more?
So he was a poor Christian conservative, and then he was a poor libertarian conservative as he gets away from his parents and then starts getting older. He's getting away from his parents. He's kind of turning away from his parents' Catholic conservative views. And so he's starting to move towards more libertarian, because libertarian is anti-God. I'm just going to put it out there. Live and let live. Do as thou will. It's anti-God. It's anything. You don't want to be south of the authoritarian line. You don't want to be to the left of the economic line. That's all anti-God. There's only one window. We can't all be right. There's got to be one right way to do it. And if you believe in God, as you start believing in God less, you become more libertarian. And then you start moving to the left, and that's Destiny's progress. He went from a Christian conservative down towards a libertarian conservative, towards the center line. Now I think he's probably come up to be a more authoritarian left. I don't know. He says he's centrist. I don't think there's any such thing as a true centrist. I think he's to the right. He just turned away from God. I know he's got to be more He's saying he became more socialist because he realized life is harder when you're poor. Once he got rich, he was like, oh, it really is different when you're poor. So then he became more socialist, where basically the rich people. But is he giving away his money? I don't know. If he's giving away a huge chunk of his money, if he's living what he's saying, he is very active politically. He gets stuff done. That's for sure. He organizes and he gets stuff done. Campaigns. And we don't really have people like that on the left that are good at. We got Charlie Kirk. We got Prager. Like TPUSA and Young Americans for Freedom or whatever. But a lot of those groups are kind of whack.
Sympathy for left-leaning ideas, particularly.
I guess my core beliefs have never really changed, but I think the way that those become applied kind of change. So much the same way that you might think that everybody deserves a shot to go to school and have an education. That might be like a core belief, where as a libertarian or conservative, I might think that as long as a school is available, everybody's got the opportunity to go and study. But maybe now as like a liberal or progressive or whatever you'd call me, I might say, okay, well, we need to make sure that there's enough, maybe like food in the household or some kind of funding program to make sure the kid can actually go to school and study, basically. So like the core drive is the same, but I think the applied principle ends up changing a bit based on what you think people's individual
is your
sense are.
concern essentially something like the observation that if people are bereft enough of substance, let's say, that it's difficult for them to take advantage of equal opportunities, even if they are presented to them, let's say?
Yeah, essentially, yeah.
And you have some belief, and correct me if I'm wrong, you have some belief that there is room for state intervention at the level of basic provision to make those opportunities more manifest.
Yeah, to varying degrees, yeah.
Okay. So let's start talking more broadly then on the political side. So how would you characterize the difference, in your opinion, between the left and the conservative political viewpoints?
On a very, very, very broad level, if there's some like good world that we're all aiming for, I think people on the left seem to think that a collection of taxes from a large population that goes into a government that's able to precisely kind of dole out where that tax money goes. You're basically able to take the problems of society. You're able to scrape off, hopefully, not super significant amount of money from people that can afford to give a lot of money, and then through government programs and redistribution, you target those taxes essentially to people that kind of need whatever bare minimum to take advantage of opportunities in society. Yeah.
Okay.
And then on the conservative end, I guess a conservative would generally think that, why would the government take my money? I think from a community point of view, through churches, through community action, through families, we can better allocate our own dollars to our own friends and family to help them and give them the things that they need so that they can better participate in and thrive in society, basically.
Facts.
Okay, so one of the things that I've always found a mystery, I think there's an equal mystery on the left and on the right in this regard, is that
they both want to help poor people. It's just different ways to do it.
Very skeptical of big government, and the leftist types tend to be more skeptical of big corporations. Right? Well, following through the logic that you just laid out, you made the suggestion that one of the things that characterizes people on the left is the belief that government can act as an agent of distribution.
Right.
Can and should act
we don't
as
believe
an
it
agent of
can.
Distribution. Okay, a potential problem for that is the gigantism of the government that does that. Now, the conservatives are skeptical of that gigantism.
Yes.
And likewise, the liberals, the progressives in particular, we'll call them progressives, are skeptical of the reach of gigantic corporations. And I've always seen a commonality in those two, in that both of them are skeptical of gigantism. And so one of the things that I'm concerned about, generally speaking, with regard to the potential for the...
And that's why we have states' rights. And that's why local and state politics is more important than national politics. Local police are more important than three-letter agencies and feds. It's not... We need authority. We need law and order. We need good leaders and politicians. Politics is just how do you deal with people. That's all politics is. How do you manage large groups of people? How do you organize? How do you have a civilization instead of anarchy, instead of chaos? And so the right isn't anti-authority, well, some people on the right are, the libertarians and the anarchists, but the authoritarian right isn't against authority and order and law and order. We're against, like JP's saying here, the gigantism of the federal government, of a large mass global government eventually that takes over, that runs the whole world. That's what we're against, and we don't want to happen.
Rise of tyranny is the emergence of giants. And one potential problem with the view that the government can and should act as an agent of redistribution is that there is an incentive put in place, two kinds of incentives. Number one, a major league incentive towards gigantism and tyranny. And number two, an incentive for psychopaths who use compassion to justify their grip on power, to take money and to claim that they're doing good.
Yep.
And I see that happening everywhere now, in the name of, particularly in the name of compassion.
Progressivism.
And it's one of the things that's made me very skeptical, in particular about the left, and at least about the progressive edge of the left. So I'm curious about what you think about those two. First of all, it's a paradox to me that the conservatives and the leftists face off each other.
It's so funny because Jordan Peterson is a psychologist, so he's got his notepad and he's taking notes. And you would expect a psychologist to do this, not so much an interviewer. Maybe an interviewer will have a pen, but you really don't see him taking notes a lot. But he's met his match here with Destiny, because Destiny comes with a notepad too. So they're both going to be like rapidly taking notes on each other the whole time. That's pretty cool.
Each other with regard to their concern about different forms of gigantism, and don't seem to notice that the thing that unites them is some antipathy. This is especially true for the libertarians, some antipathy towards gigantic structures per se. And so then I would say, with regards to your antithesis between liberalism and conservatives, the conservatives are pointing to the fact that there are intermediary forms of distribution that can be utilized to solve the social problems that you're describing, that don't bring with them the associated problem of gigantism. And like, it's been shocking to me to watch the left, especially in the last 6 years, ally itself, for example, with pharmaceutical companies, which was something I'd never thought I would see in my lifetime. Mm-hmm. I mean, for decades, the only gigantic corporations the left...
Yeah, that's been totally flipped. The right was always pro-vaccine, pro-medicine, because that's capitalism. That's one of the biggest money makers that we've ever had. Americans, we make the best medicines. We got the best hospitals. And so the right always loved that. Whereas the left is against that, because they're against the corporations. We're against the government. They think the government can fix everything. A lot of people on the right think the corporations can fix everything. There's, so maybe that's an area in economics. Maybe you want to be a little more towards the center, because, if you get too far capitalist, then you got imperialism and you got monopolies and you got organizations running the whole world. You get too far to the left, government, people think they have control of the government, but in reality, the government has all the control, and it's nothing but poor people and the elites in the government.
Was more skeptical of than the fossil fuel companies were the pharmaceutical companies. And that all seemed to vanish overnight around the COVID time. So I know the story. That's a lot of things to throw at you, but it sort of outlines the territory that we could probably investigate productively.
Yeah, so a couple things. I would say that the current political landscape we have, I think, is less. I understand the concept of conservatives supporting corporations and liberals supporting like large government. I think today the divide we're starting to see more and more is more of like a populist, anti-populist rise, or even like an institutional or anti-institutional rise. So, for instance, I think conservatives today in the United States are largely characterized with, I would say, with populism. In that they're supporting like certain figures, namely right now Donald Trump, who they think alone can kind of like lead them against the corrupt institutions, be them corporate or government. I feel like most conservatives today are not as trustful of big corporations as they were back in like the Bush era, where we would, conservatives would champion, big corporations.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah. I don't
That's
think
a strange thing.
And the
'cause it makes
military.
the modern conservative.
The same thing with the military. There's still a lot of old school Republicans and boomers that are hawks, and they love war, and it's great money. Capitalists are hawks. That's imperialism. I forget who wrote the book, but it's called Imperialism: The Dangerous Ends to Capitalism, and it is true. That's what we see with the military-industrial complex. But a lot of the younger right is starting to, I don't want to say turn against the military, because they still want the military. We're turning against the powers in the military, because we think that they are, we need to, I don't know, we need to revamp the system in the military too, because they're doing a lot of weird stuff. I don't have enough time to get in. We've talked about it on the show before, all the feminization of the military and the constant wars over nothing. So I think a lot of the younger right is starting to turn on industries, like Destiny's saying.
Conservatives a lot more like the 60s leftists.
Potentially, yeah.
I mean, that brings us into the issue, too, of whether the left-right divide is actually a reasonable way of construing the...
I am reading your damn comments. I'm not reading comments all out loud because I need to get through this. I don't even have enough time to get through this. We got to get through this. I got to get through this. I got to get through this. I got to make it. And anyway, also, hot and sweaty. Maybe it's because I'm using the warmer light instead of the cooler light. I usually used to always use the cooler light, but I've started using the warmer light because it makes me gives me more color in my skin. But no, I'm not hot and sweaty. It is kind of hot in here. It's starting to warm up. So it is getting a little warm in here. I probably don't need a hoodie on.
Current political landscape at all, and I'm not sure it is, but...
Right now, it kind of is, but only because so many conservatives are following Trump. So like your populist, anti-populist thing kind of maps on kind of cleanly to the left and right. It doesn't work with progressives, though, or the far left, because they're also anti-large everything. So in a surprising way, on very, very far left people, you might find them having a bit more in common with kind of like a MAGA Trump supporter than like a center-left liberal. So for instance, like both of these groups of people on the very far left will be very dovish on foreign policy, probably a little bit more isolationist. They're not a big fan of like a ton of immigration or a ton of trade with other countries. They might think that there's a lot of institutional capture of both government and corporations. So both all of the MAGA supporters and the far, far left might think that corporations don't have our best interest at heart and the government is corrupt and captured by lobbyists.
Yeah,
you'll see a lot of overlap there.
Right.
I think that sometimes there's a couple things. One, this is something I feel like I've discovered. People have no principles. I think that people are largely guided by whatever is kind of satisfying them or making them feel good at the time. I think that's a really important thing to understand because people's beliefs will seem to
for
change
yourself,
at
Destiny.
random. If you're trying to...
Just because you're a sexual deviant, you don't have any principles, doesn't mean people don't have principles, buddy.
imagine that a belief is coming from some underlying principle or is governed by some internal, like moral or reasonable code or whatever. I think generally there are large social groups and people kind of follow them along from thing to thing, which is why you end up in strange worlds sometimes where, like the position on vaccines and being an anti-vaxxer might have been seen as something, 10 years ago as kind of like a hippie leftist. And now maybe it's more like a conservative or it's associated more with like MAGA Trump supporters or whatever. I think as a result of how the social groups move around. When it comes to you mentioned this like gigantism thing. That's another thing where I'm not sure if people actually care about gigantism or if they're using it as a proxy for other things that they don't like. Like, I could totally imagine a
Well, I
person.
care about it.
Sure. Yeah, you might. Yeah, sorry. It just
That's
mean
okay.
in general.
That's
Yeah.
okay.
Because like I could imagine somebody saying that like they don't trust like a large government, they think there's too much, prone to tyranny or something like that, but also be supportive of an institution like the Catholic Church, which is literally, one guy who is a direct
Right,
line to
but they
God.
can't tax,
Well, I mean, there's
and they don't have a military.
that.
They can't
Jordan's JP's getting mad because he's not getting mad, but he sees what Destiny was doing there. Destiny thinks he's talking to somebody else. Destiny thinks he's talking to Nick Fuentes. That's why he's bringing up the Catholic Church and the church thing. Jordan Peterson is not a big church guy. I think he believes in God, and he thinks the Bible is a great book. But I don't think he's like a church guy. Is he? I don't think he is. He's not a Catholic. So who are you talking to, Destiny? Destiny was talking like he was talking to somebody else, and Jordan Peterson's like, no, you're not. I don't know who you think you're talking to.
script you.
True.
Right?
Yeah.
And they can't throw you in jail.
That is true. Yeah. I mean,
Right. Well, those are major and significant. I mean, I get
Got
the
it.
overlap. Don't get me wrong.
Sure. But I'm saying, like, even if you had a local government, like if you had a state government or a tribe, usually they've got some form of enacting punishment. It'll be sometimes more brutal, but they can throw you in jail. Conscription hasn't existed in the U.S. since the Vietnam War.
Yet.
I mean, yeah, true. Yeah.
Yeah, true.
So yeah, I think that I guess when I look at
Let's go back. Let's go back to to the redistribution issue. I mean,
Jordan Peterson's getting frustrated because Destiny's taking notes too. And Destiny's acting. He's trying to Goodwill Hunting this therapist.
we pay 65% of our income at, say, upper middle class to upper middle class level in Canada. It isn't obvious to me at all that money is well used. In fact, quite the contrary. In my country now, our citizens make 60% they produce 60% of what you produce in the US. That's plummeted over the last 20 years as state intervention has increased. I'm not convinced that the claim
See, does this white light work better?
that the interests of
Do I
people
look-
who lack
do I
opportunity
look cooler
are best
now?
served by state intervention. And there's
Do I look cooler now? Do I look cooler? Does it look like it's cooler in my room now? You see, you don't understand lighting, Freddie. I look cooler now because I use the cooler light. I've been using the warmer light, which makes me look warmer.
there's a couple of reasons for that. I mean, first of all, I'm aware of the relationship between inequality and social problem. There's a very well-developed literature.
He is on
that,
Adderall.
and it essentially shows that the more arbitrary, the broader the reach of inequality in a political institution of any given size, the more social unrest. So where all people are poor, there isn't much social unrest, and where all people are rich, there isn't much social unrest. But when there's a big gap between the two, there's plenty. And
Allegedly, according to him, he wasn't on Adderall for the majority of his career, and he just recently, like 6 months ago, started taking Adderall. And he actually kind of slows down a little bit when he's on his dose, I think. A lot of people just talk fast because they're smart. A lot of times you don't have to be a tweaker to talk fast. You just got to know what you're talking about, be confident in it, understand it, and then you not have an above 100 IQ, and then you just naturally talk fast when you're talking about something you know about. Why you got the sleeves rolled up if it's hot? Why do you have the sleeves rolled up if it's hot? Because when you're in a hoodie and it's hot, you roll the sleeves up. It's not hot. It's just not cold in here. It's warm enough that I roll the sleeves up. Duh. What are you talking about?
that's mostly driven by disaffected young men.
This is why I'm not going to read your comments, Freddie, because you just derailed the stream.
who aren't very happy that they can't climb the hierarchy. There are barriers in their way. And so there is reason to ameliorate relative poverty. The problem with that, to some degree, is that most attempts to ameliorate relative poverty tend to increase absolute poverty, and they do it dramatically. And the only solution that we've ever been able to develop to that is something approximating a free market system. I wouldn't call it a capitalist system because I think that's capture of the terminology by the radical leftists. It's a free exchange system. And the price you pay for a free exchange system is you still have inequality, but the advantage you gain is that the absolute levels of privation plummet. And I think the data on that I think they're absolutely conclusive, especially, and that's been especially demonstrated in the radical decrease in rates of poverty since the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1989, because we've lifted more people out of poverty in the last 4 decades than we had in the entire course of human history up to that date. And that's not least because the statist interventionist types who argued for a radical state-sponsored redistribution lost the Cold War, right? And that freed up Africa to some degree, and certainly the Southeast Asian countries, to pursue something
Not
like
tonight.
a free trade economy. And that instantly made them rich, even China. So that's an argument, let's say, on the side of free exchange, but it's also an argument, a twofold argument, pointing out.
No, I'll do Discord tomorrow. And you just need to not be a baby, Freddie. Just go in there and you can roast him or something. I don't know. Dang. What would it be like if somebody I didn't like kept coming into Discord? Well, I would just ban them. You want me to tell him, Buff, you can't be. We have to make a special allotment for Freddie, so Freddie can come in. Buff, you're not allowed to be in the Discord when Freddie's in the Discord. When Freddie leaves, you can come in. You guys are gonna have to take turns or something. $50 donation, and Josh will burn the Buccaneers hoodie. Let's go. No, the hoodie costs more than $50. Why would I do that? $100. I'll do it.
How we ameliorate absolute poverty, which should be a concern for leftists, but doesn't seem to be anymore, by the way. And also an argument for the maintenance of a necessary inequality. Like, I'm not sure that inequality can be decreased beyond a certain degree without that decrease causing others.
I would wear an Eagles jersey for free if I had to.
But it's a complicated problem.
But I would definitely wear one for $100.
One point of clarification: when you say leftist, what do you mean?
I like the Eagles.
Well, I was going with your definition, like essentially the core idea being something like the central problem being one of relative inequality and distribution of resources, and the central solution to that being something like state-sponsored economic intervention. I mean, there's other ways we could define left and right, and we can do that, but I'll stick with the one that you brought forward to begin with.
Gotcha. Okay. I only want to be clear on that because people get mad if I call myself a leftist. Oftentimes online or especially in Europe or worldwide, leftists will refer exclusively to like socialists or communists, and anybody to the right of that would be considered like a liberal. If you
no, usually a fascist.
Well, depending on who you're
very rapidly.
Yeah. I just wanted to be clear on that. So I'm absolutely a pro-capitalist, pro-free market guy. I'm never gonna.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. It's good to get that clear. Why?
Yeah. Because I would argue that when you look at like the fall of the Soviet Union, or you look at the failure of like socialist or communist regimes, I don't know if the issue there was so much redistribution. I think the problem
that was one of many issues.
I don't think it was an issue at all, actually, I would say. I think the issue was command economies.
Wait a
minute.
minute. What do you mean redistribution wasn't an issue? What the hell do you think they did to the kulaks? That was forced redistribution.
That's what Mega Dave is.
In the death of 6 million people. So maybe I'm not understanding.
Mega Dave said he was a kulak. And I kind of knew what it was, but I kind of didn't know what it was. And also, sometimes, somebody asks me if I know what a word means, I might say, I don't know. What does it mean to you? Because I want to see what they think the word means before I tell them what I think the word means.
understanding what you mean, but that was redistribution at its like pinnacle.
Sure.
And forced redistribution. And it was brutal.
When I think of the strengths of capitalism, the ability for markets to dynamically respond to shifting consumer demand.
Y'all are always retracting messages. I must be like vicious. What are you do? You scared I'm gonna like read your comment? What did you retract it for? Or is it a typo? Why y'all always retracting comments?
Is like the reason why capitalism and free market economies dominate the world. When you've got socialist or communist systems, command economies, where a government is trying to say, this is how much this is going to cost, this is how much you're going to produce and make. This is a failed way of managing a state economy. Even in places where they still do it, there are always shadow economies and stuff. There were in the Soviet Union that prop up where people try to basically ameliorate the conditions that are resulting from said horrible command economy practices. So I guess in a way you could argue a command economy is kind of like redistribution. It's a form of it, but
no, it's a worse problem. If you're pointing to the fact that that's a worse problem, I'm with you
I would say that's
100%.
definitely the reason why these places failed, because they just weren't able to respond to changing conditions.
Okay, so what's the difference between us?
Going online without ExpressVPN.
I hate how he does his ads because you don't hear what's being said during the ad. They're still talking in the background and the ad's playing.
Is like leaving your kids with the need. But why would you ever
See, they're still talking in the background.
Risk? You leave your data in financial $1,000 per person tunnel between your super honest and
Okay, so what's the difference between a state that attempts to redistribute to foster equality of opportunity and a command economy? Is it a difference of degree? Like, are you looking at models, let's say, like the Scandinavian countries? Or I wouldn't use Canada, by the way, because Canada is now
track when I misspell.
What would you call predicted?
Y'all are crazy.
Predicted by economic analysts to have the worst.
You delete your comments because of typos? What the heck?
Performing economy for the next 4 decades of all the developed world. So maybe
you all do. What the
Canada off the table. Sure. Scandinavian countries are often the polities that are pointed to by, I would say, by people who, at least in part, are putting forward a view of redistribution for purposes of equality of opportunity, like you are. But they're a strange analogy because they're very small countries, and up till now they were very ethnically homogenous. Exactly, and that makes a big difference when you're trying to flatten out the redistribution. Plus, they're also incredibly wealthy, which makes redistribution, let's say, a lot easier. So why doesn't a government that's bent on redistribution fall prey to the pitfalls of command economy and forced redistribution, for that matter? How do you protect against that?
I think what you have to do is very, very, very difficult. Is people get very ideologically captured by both ends, and they feel very, like committed, or they feel very allegiant to pushing certain forms of economic organization. And I think sometimes it blinds them to some of the benefits of what exists when you incorporate kind of multiple models, or you'd call them mixed economies, which is really what every capitalist economy today is. It's some form of free market capitalism combined with some form of like government intervention to control for negative externalities.
I think it's funnier when I read the typos, because you did say, so you're saying cornball, and it looked like it said comball. Don't want the grammar police pointing it out. I will point it out. I didn't know you even, well, I did know you could retract your message. I like to leave the typos there for flavor, just to let you know that even I can misspell a word from time to time.
These are the ways that all economies, even in Scandinavia and the world, work. And I think that recognizing the benefits of both systems are the best way to make things work. Yeah.
Fair enough. And the Scandinavian countries seem to have done a pretty good job of that. But like I said, they have a simpler problem to solve, let's say, than the Americans have. Negative externalities. That's an interesting rabbit hole to wander down, because the problem I have with negative externalities, you made a case already that, and again, correct me if I've got this wrong, but I think that I understood what you
Negative
said.
externalities?
A free market, free exchange economy is a gigantic distributed computational device.
Basically, yeah.
Right, exactly. And
Which,
so-
funnily enough, one of the big problems for command economies is called the computation problem, because no central body can actually compute,
Yes,
the ins and outs of.
right, exactly. Right. That's not, that's a fatal problem, right? Because it doesn't have the computational power. It certainly doesn't have the speed of data recognition. It doesn't have the on-the-ground agents if all of the perception and decision-making is centralized, right? It's way too low resolution. It's going to crash. Okay, so, and I think that's comprehensible technically as well as ideologically. All right, so, but having said that, with regard...
Both these fools are clicking their pens. The whole dang thing is click, 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 right, click, click, click. My misophonia is acting up.
To externalities, all the externalities that a market economy can't compute are so complex that they can't be determined centrally by the same argument. And
Okay, I'm leaving then Alan from now on. See, I like that. I would have to delete all my messages. Yeah. Floor leaves her misspellings up. She destroys the English language consistently and gets roasted for it. But she doesn't retract her messages. Read that typo. Which typo? Looks like you spelled everything right there. Why are we talking about redistribution of wealth if it's not inevitable? Why are we talking about redistribution of wealth if it's not inevitable? That's not a typo. It just doesn't make sense. If it's not inevitable. It is not inevitable, but it could happen. That's why we're talking about it. It has happened before. It's neat. What? What the?
There are ways to account for them, though.
Really?
That work with.
Tell me.
Yeah. So
because I can't see that, because I can't see how that they can be accounted for without the same computational problem immediately arising.
Yeah, and I understand that. And I think that's a problem sometimes of people very far on the left when they want to deal with certain problems. I think that they want to bring like heavy-handed, like things like price controls in to say, well, we need less of this, so let's just make this cost this particular thing, which ironically enough introduces a whole other set of externalities that will happen when you get a lot of friction between where your price floor or ceiling is set compared to what a market was set at. But ideally,
messages. I'd have to delete all my messages. Whoop, that's not a E, that's a A. This dude wants to give me a massage. He's gay. Quit worrying about messages and worry about the massages.
if you're a reasonable person and you view economies as mixed economies, what you try to do is you try to take these externalities, meaning things that aren't accounted for with your primary system. So in a capitalist system, an externality might be something that causes a negative effect, but it doesn't cost you any money. Pollution would be a good example of that. And rather than saying like, well, no company can pollute this much, or, you know, if you're a company, you have to use these things because the other things are making too much pollution. All you do is you say, okay, well, if we've determined that, say, carbon is bad for the atmosphere.
I don't know, Latina and Cali, that's interesting.
The government is going to say that, yeah, if you pollute this much, here's the...
I don't know why your phone thinks it's on a treadmill when it's in a car when it's on a treadmill, but that is interesting. So it like knows that it's on a moving thing somehow. That's weird. Huh. Like senses I don't know.
The price, and then if you want to pay for it, you can. But that type of intervention in the economy basically allows the free market to hopefully do its job because the government has tacked on a little bit of a price something that tries to account for the cost of that externality. Yeah.
Great. That's a great example. We can go right down that rabbit hole. Carbon. Okay, so first of all, one of the things I've seen, you tell me what you think about this, something that...
Oh, I didn't even see that one. Retarded? I didn't see it because I was on top chat instead of live chat.
I've seen that actually shocks me, that I was interested in watching over the last 5 or 6 years. I wondered what would happen when the left, the progressives, ran into a conundrum.
A conundrum.
And the conundrum is quite straightforward. If you pursue carbon pricing and you make energy more expensive, then you hurt the poor. And I don't think you just hurt them. In fact, I know you just don't hurt them. I heard a man 2 days ago who's fed 350 million people in the course of his life, heading the UN's largest relief agency, make the claim quite straightforwardly that misappropriation on the part of interventionist governments increased the rate of absolute privation dramatically in the world over the last 4 or 5 years, and that has happened not least because of carbon pricing. Not just carbon pricing, but the insistence that carbon per se is an externality that we should control. Now, Germany's paid a radical price for that, for example. So their power is now about 5 times as expensive as it could be. And they pollute more per unit of power than they did 10 years ago before they introduced these policies that were hypothetically there to account for externality. And the externality was carbon dioxide. I don't think that's a computable externality. And I don't think there's any evidence whatsoever that it's actually an externality that we should be warping the economic system to ameliorate, if the cost of that, and it will be an increase in absolute privation among the world's poor. So, and here's an additional argument on that front with regards to externalities. You get that wrong, and here's something you could get right instead. If you ameliorate absolute poverty among the world's 1 billion poorest, they take a longer view of the future. And that means they become environmentally aware. And so the fastest route to a sustainable planet could well be the remediation of absolute poverty. And the best route to that is cheap energy. And we're interfering with the development of cheap energy by meddling with the hypothetically detrimental externality of carbon dioxide. And so I think this is a complete bloody travesty, by the way. We are putting the lives of hundreds of millions of people directly at risk.
Push back,
right
Destiny.
Now, to hypothetically save people in the future, depending on the accuracy of our projections, 100 years.
Damn.
These
Calm down, Joedan Peterson. You're the therapist here.
Interventionists, these people who are remediating externalities, they actually believe that they can calculate an economic projection 1 century out. That's utterly delusional.
So, okay, so just to be clear, the first thing, I was just giving an example of how you can use like a government intervention to make a free market track something, which is what cap and trade or like carbon taxes would do. I wasn't necessarily speaking to the strength of that individual thing, but
yeah, but that's a good thing to focus on.
Yeah, we can focus on that as well.
Major externality.
Yeah, we can focus on that as well. So, the first thing, this is going to sound mean, but I'm very realistic. There needs to be a better argument than just it disproportionately impacts the poor. That's not always
classic leftist argument.
Sure, it might be, but
right, but it's the same argument you made to justify your swing to the left at the beginning of our discussion.
Right.
You said that you were looking at economic inequalities that disproportionately affected the poor. So I can't see why, and I'm not trying to be mean about this either. I can't see why you could base your argument that it was morally appropriate for you to swing to the left from your previous position because you saw disproportionate effects on the poor. And I can't use that argument in the situation that I'm presenting it right now.
Well, because it depends on if we think it's a condition that ought to be remedied or not. For instance, if I walk, around and I see homeless people and I'm like, man, this is really sad. We ought to spend more money on homeless people because it seems like they're disproportionately affected.
Oh yeah, great idea, Destiny.
And then somebody says, oh, well, do you think we should still lock up, rapists and murderers? Aren't they disproportionately poor? I'd probably say, well, yeah, we probably should. And I go, well, isn't that hypocritical? Well, no, I think that rapists and murderers should probably be in jail, but we can also help the homeless at the same time. I think that just helping the poor isn't an argument like a blank check to do every possible thing to satisfy poorer people.
Right,
it's going to depend on from issue to issue.
Yeah, that's fine.
So, like, for instance, I think
because the poor, everyone who's poor is not a victim. Some people who are poor are psychopathic perpetrators.
Sure.
And it's very useful to distinguish them. But I was making a much more specific argument. My argument was that the fastest way out of absolute privation for the world's bottom billion people is through cheap energy.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying there. So I just working my way towards that.
Yeah.
I just want to say that just because something targets the poor is not necessarily an argument against it.
Depends on how hard it targets them, and it depends on whether mass starvation is the outcome.
The outcome is important. That I agree with. So, for instance, like a sin tax.
The outcome will be mass starvation.
I'm getting to it. Okay. Yeah, I'm getting to it. Okay. Sin taxes on like cigarettes and alcohol are always going to disproportionately impact the poor, or even sugar, we might say, right? But just because that disproportionately impacts the poor, is that a good thing or a bad thing? These are probably the people that suffer the most from those particular afflictions. Right.
So, and that is an immediate versus delayed issue too, right? Because the reason,
obesity isn't immediate. I don't think alcoholism
the reason for the tax is to stop people from pursuing a certain form of short-term gratification at the cost of their longer-term well-being.
Correct. And that exact same idea if you believe climate models, or if you believe that we're heading in a certain direction in terms of climate, the overall warming of the planet, would be the same argument you would make for climate change.
Only if you believe that you
Go
can model
inside
economic
the
development
side.
100 years into the future.
Well, we're not trying to model. We're more concerned with modeling climate development,
No,
economic
no,
development.
we're
Yes,
equally
absolutely.
model
no, well,
climate
okay,
development
tell
either.
me how I'm wrong. I don't
Obviously.
believe that, because what I see happening is two things. We have climate models that purport to explain what's going to happen over a century on the climate side, but we have economic models layered right on top of those.
Yes, and they put them together. They say, the climate is racist. The climate is affecting poor people the most, and since black people and brown people are the most poor people, climate change is racist. The climate is racist, and who made the climate change? The evil rich white man.
That claim that there's going to be various forms of disaster for human beings economically as a consequence of that climate change. And so that's like two towers of Babel stacked on top of one another.
Facts.
And so, because if people were just saying, oh, the climate's going to change, there'd be no moral impetus in that. It's the climate's going to change, and that's
Because
going to
of
be
you.
disastrous for the biosphere and for humanity. But that's an economic argument as well as a climate-based argument.
It's both, but the worst projections of what would happen if the climate took a disastrous turn are worse than the worst projections of what is our planet going to look like economically if we hardcore police,
Right. But
fossil
why
fuels.
would you? Okay, but
So
I
the
don't
argument-
understand
the-
the distinction
Well, the
between the models.
Well, the argument would be that whatever pain and suffering poor people might.
Oh, and by the way, guys, if you want to know my theory, this has been my theory for a while. This has been my theory before the Destiny and Ben Shapiro debate. I think Destiny might get signed to Daily Wire as like their centrist representative. Because first he debated Ben, then he debated Candace, then he debated, did he debate Michael Knowles? Did he talk with Michael Knowles yet? I was watching Michael Knowles and Pearl, but no, I watched another one last night. Oh, we're going to have to watch that on the channel one of these days. That was a good one. That was Alex O'Connor and Michael Knowles talking about the founding fathers. Was the America founded on Christianity or secularism? And it was Alex O'Connor, the atheist, versus Michael Knowles. It was a really good debate. We'll have to watch that on the channel one day. But anyway, I don't think Destiny's been on Michael Knowles' show yet. Maybe he has, but I think Daily Wire is going to sign Destiny because he's been watching a lot of Daily Wire on his channel. Also, because Daily Wire doesn't strike you when you play their stuff. You can commentate on Daily Wire's videos, and you don't get hit for it. So I don't know. Now he's debating Jordan Peterson, Candace, Ben. Michael Knowles will probably be next if he hasn't already talked to him. And I think when his kick deal runs out, which is coming up soon, he might be the centrist of Daily Wire. Like that's what they would label him as, so that they could do a Crossfire style show and have him. I don't know. It's a crazy theory, but I don't know.
Endure right now because of a move towards green energy. That pain and suffering is going to be short term and far less than the long term pain and suffering.
Right, but
that
that's
comes along
dependent
with,
on the integrity of the economic models and
the climate models as well, right?
Right, exactly,
Of course,
but is in exactly the stacked manner that I described. And
you don't get his appeal. Maybe you're missing something. I don't know. If you don't like it, you don't like it. But I watch a lot of Destiny stuff, and I started watching as a hate watcher because JLP had him on. I was like, let's check this guy out, and I watch as a hate watcher. But then Destiny has evolved, and now he really does do deep research. It's autistic. It's stuff you're not. It's the type of stuff I listen to when I'm at work. I listen to like 4-hour debates when I'm at work with like philosophers and stuff. And so that's not what you're into. But if you're listening, if you want to hear an autistic guy doing the research live and giving both sides of the argument, he's going to usually pick the side I'm going to disagree with. But he'll give you both sides and he'll, yeah. That's why I like it. I don't really watch it for the gaming. I just listen to when he's doing research, when he's debating people. He debates lots and lots and lots of people. But yeah.
like there's nobody in 1890 who could have predicted what was going to happen in 1990 economically. Not a bit. And if we think we can predict like 50 years out now with the current rate of technology and calculate the potential impact of climate change on economic flourishing for human beings, we're deluded. No one can do that. And then, it's worse. So imagine that as you do that and you project outward, your margin of error increases. That's absolutely, definitely the case. And at some point, you're certainly on the climate side, the margin of error gets rapidly to the point where it subsumes any estimate of the degree to which the climate is going to transform. And that happens even more rapidly on the economic side.
Potentially,
so,
but I think right now, this is a disagreement on the fact of the matter, though, not the philosophy of what we're talking about in terms of controlling externalities. If we think, I'm curious, let's say that we think we can accurately predict the climate and the economic impact, and we think that the climate impact would be far worse if we don't account for that, both in terms of human conditions.
I don't believe any of those presumptions.
Sure, but then if you don't, but I mean, like, obviously, if I agreed with that factual analysis, I would probably agree with you on the prescription here too, right? And I thought that like none of the climate models were accurate or couldn't accurately predict anything, then I'd also say why make?
Well, they're not sufficiently accurate. That's the first thing. And because they have a margin of error, and it's a large margin of error, they don't even model cloud coverage well. That's a big problem. They don't have the resolution. They don't have nearly the resolution to produce the accuracy that's claimed by the climate apocalypse mongers.
People keep saying that, but we just got another one of the hottest years on record. How many times are we going to have another hottest year on record? How many times are we going to have an increase of...
The record started in like the 80s, Destiny. Climate changes and it's slow. Dang, there's been ice ages. Then they say next year they're going to say we're going into ice age. We have one of the coldest winters ever on record, which is 40 years. 40 years, maybe 60 years of record. And this is from a guy who thinks that the world is 40 billion years old. So what the hell are you talking about? 40 years on a record of 40 billion years is a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of the records of the Earth. Bruh.
Carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere before we're finally like, okay.
I don't know. And the reason I don't know is because it depends. The scientific answer to that question depends precisely on the time frame over which you evaluate the climate fluctuation.
Yes.
And that's actually an intractable scientific problem. So you might say, well, if you take the last 100 years, this variation looks pretty dismal. And I'd say, well, what if you took the last 150,000 years? Or the last 10,000 or the last 10 million? You can't specify the damn time frame of analysis.
The time frame is incredibly important. That would be like saying, look at your, let's say somebody developed cancer and they didn't realize it, and the person has lost, 40 or 50 pounds in the past 6 months, and I'm just like, you look very sickly. And you're like, okay, well, look at my weight fluctuation over the past 10 years. You say, well, that doesn't really matter. What matters is the fact that
I'm not saying the time frame isn't important.
Well, but I'm saying that
it is important.
Yeah, but
I'm saying I don't know how to
matter.
specify it.
Well, you would probably specify it with the beginning of the industrial age, right?
Why?
Because that's when carbon dioxide, which is a gas that's seen as trapping more heat on the planet.
Why is that relevant to the time over which you compute the variability?
Because it seems like as carbon dioxide has increased in the atmosphere, the surface temperatures have risen at a rate that is a departure from what we'd expect over 150,000 year cycles of temperature variations on the planet.
No, not with that time frame. That's just not the case.
It's absolutely the case.
No, what do you mean? You just flipped to 150,000 year time span.
What I'm saying is that if we expect to see a temperature do this in a 150,000 year time span, in a 100 year time span, seeing it do this, that's very worrying. Now,
you mean
it could
like
be the
Michael
case.
Mann's hockey stick, the one that's under attack right now in court by a major statistician who claimed that he falsified his data. I mean, that spike?
I'm talking about the record temperatures that have been declared for like the past 5 years that have also increased with the concentration of parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. I mean, I'm not going to tell you that every model is perfect.
They're not
right
perfect.
Now, sure, but right now we're like standing in traffic with our eyes closed saying,
So, source doesn't matter. His source is the internet. It's the same as all our source, which is the mass collection of all the data and written information that we have over the history of the world at our fingertips. It's the same source we all have. So source is doesn't matter. Like, his source is the internet. He just goes on the internet and he reads all the sources, and then he thinks logically to come up. The thing is, he's disingenuous. That's why I don't like him, because he will research things on his show. Like, he'll be researching January 6th, and he'll see the same video that I'll play on my channel, and I'll talk about it. And then if I were to talk about it with him later, he'd be like, no, that never happened. That's crazy. And I'd be like, bro, you watched it on your show. You saw it happen. what are you talking about? Or like in one debate he recently did, he said something about they never said that the vaccines would give you immunity. And then the person played a clip of him reading the source, the CDC site, reading where it says this may not give you immunity, and then reading where they changed the definition of vaccine because it didn't give you immunity anymore. So he knew that the vaccines didn't give you immunity, but then in a debate later, he's like, they never said vaccines wouldn't give you immunity. So either he's so biased in his head that it changes his like beliefs influence what he knows. So when he goes into a debate, his mind has like tricked him into thinking that his beliefs are reality. Or he's just disingenuous, or he knows damn well that they said that and he's just lying in the debate. That's what I don't like that he does. But the thing is, I don't like him. This is an op. This is the opponent. This is the enemy. You got to know your enemy. And he's a smart guy. And he does the research. When I say he does the research is the internet. We have it all. You can go to Wikipedia and people can complain about Wikipedia as a source, but they've never read a full Wikipedia page. Like the Wikipedia gives you sources at the bottom, and then you can go to those sources and you can read the original source. And then those sources will give you more sources, and you can go to those sources and read those sources. And it's cool that we have the internet because we can do that. So if I'm on my show and I'm talking about a topic and I'm showing some websites and I'm reading off the websites, that doesn't mean that that's all that I know about the topic. And that doesn't mean that though I'm citing them as a source. It's just, this is how you research things. You look at a bunch of different things and then you come up with your ideas, you know? And he does that. He's just disingenuous in debates.
The car hasn't hit me yet, so I don't think there's any coming. I think it's pretty undeniable at this point that there is an impact on climate across the planet. I
think that's highly deniable. We have no idea what the impact is from. We don't know where the carbon dioxide is from. We can't measure the warming of the oceans. We have terrible temperature records going back 100 years. Almost all the terrestrial temperature.
I don't know if you debate a lot of people, SE Wolverines, but wait till you use one of your sources that matter and somebody says that source doesn't matter. I don't like that source. You're getting down to subjective sourcism, which is what liberals do a lot in debates. I don't know about all that. I think you're wrong on that, buddy. But you'll figure it out.
Detection sites were first put outside urban areas, and then then you have to correct. Then you have to correct for the movement of the urban areas, and then you introduce an error parameter that's larger than the purported increase in temperature that you're planning to measure.
Who's your source on your COVID data? The CDC? Because that's the absolute source. That's the source you're supposed to go to. And they were flip-flopping. It's not about your source. It's about the source of information, which is the internet. You can look at all of it. You can look at all the sources. And then when you start playing the source citing game, you're going to lose every time. Because somebody's not going to like your source and you're not going to like their source. So you're not going to agree on the facts and the data. Instead, what you do is you read both the sources and you come up with your own logic and rationality and reason. And then you just explain it. When somebody asks you for a source, don't give them a source. Just say either you believe me or I'm either right or I'm wrong. You either believe me or not. You can trust that I did some research. This is what people do to me all the time. They do this to me all the time. I'll say some stuff and they'll say, what's your source on that? And I can't think of a source off the top of my head. And then they gaslight me and they make me think I'm lying. But then later I'll go back and look into it and I'll find like 12 sources. So what am I supposed to cite? Which of these 12 sources? Let me find the best source that I should cite. It's dumb.
This isn't data. This is guess. And there's something weird underneath it. There's something weird that isn't oriented well towards human beings underneath it. It has this guise of compassion. Oh, we're going to save the poor in the future. It's like that's what the bloody communists said. And they killed a lot of people doing it. And we're walking down that same road now with this insistence that, you know, we're so compassionate that we care about the poor 100 years from now. And if we have to wipe out several hundred million of them,
right.
That's a small price to
Yeah, my source is my balls and my word. That's my source. That's the only source I'm at. My source is God, my balls, and my word. That's the only source that I'm ever going to give you.
Pay for the future utopia. And we've heard that sort of thing before. And the alternative to that is to stop having global level elites plot out a utopian future.
Yep.
Or even an anti-dystopian future.
Y'all are derailing the video, but Freddie, I know you had to spell check that one. I know you had to spell check that one. You didn't spell that off the top, bruh.
And that's exactly what's happening now with organizations like the WEF. And if
Yeah.
this wasn't immediately...
Yes, that is true, SE Wolverines. There are garbage sources. You're right about that. But what I'm saying is, you get what I'm saying. But now I get what you're saying too. See, I also can't, when you're chatting and you're writing and I'm just reading, I'm just reacting to the words on the screen. So I don't know your tone. I don't know. So I'm not trying to be confrontational with you, but yeah, that makes sense. There are some garbage sources. But then sometimes the sources that I would use are what liberals would call garbage sources. They'd say that's not true. That's a fake source. So, yeah, even then you got to be careful with that. That's subjective because what we say is a bad source, they're going to say is a good source. And what we say, if I say CNN is a bad source to get your news from and your information from, the left is going to say, well, Fox is a bad source. You know? And I don't think either of those are good sources, but you get the argument.
Impacting the poor in a devastating manner. I wouldn't care about it that much, but it is. I watched over the course of the last 5 years the estimate of the number of people who were in serious danger of food privation rise from about 100 million to about 350 million. That's a major price to pay for a little bit of what would you say for progress on the climate front that's so narrow it can't even be measured.
I don't think the increase in hungry people on the planet is because of climate policies.
Why not?
Because I don't think that countries in Africa are being pushed away from fossil fuels. I think most developing nations.
Of course they are. They can't even get loans from the World Bank to pursue fossil fuel development. And there's plenty of African leaders who are screeching at the top of their lungs about that because the elites in the West have decided that, well, it was okay for us to use fossil fuel so that we wouldn't have to starve to death and our children had some opportunities. But maybe the starving masses that are too large a load for the world anyways shouldn't have that opportunity. And that's direct policy from the UN.
That's deep.
Fostered by organizations like the WEF. They're going to have to turn to renewables.
Deep.
Yeah, well, good luck with that. Because renewables have no energy density. Besides that, they're not renewable and they're not environmentally friendly. And then
Jordan's been on this for a long time. He's been saying the best way to solve poverty is cheap energy. He's been on this for a long time. And this is why he rails against the climate change people. He's making a great point here. I don't know how Destiny's going to come back against this, but wow. So the UN has climate regulations on Africa, so Africa can't use fossil fuels or nuclear energy, which would be better than the fossil fuels anyway. And we have all sorts of regulations on that in America. I know we have nuclear plants in America, but not as much as we should. There's a lot of regulations, a lot of red tape, and that's due to climate change policies. Wow, that makes sense. It's deep.
One more thing. There's one more weird thing underneath all of this.
Okay.
Well, let's say if carbon dioxide was actually your bugbear and it was genuine. Well, then why wouldn't the Greens, for example, in Africa, the progressives, be agitating to expand the use of nuclear energy? Especially because Germany has to import it anyways, especially because France has demonstrated that it's possible. We could drive down the cost of energy with low-cost nuclear, and there'd be no carbon production. And then the poor people would have something to eat. Because
just so you guys know, I did not pre-watch this. This is my first time seeing this, so... is it predictable because it's conservative talking points, or is it predictable because I'm a damn genius? I'm kidding. I think it's predictable because these are common conservative talking points, and this is what I do. But yeah, nuclear.
Because they'd have enough energy, and that isn't what's happening. And that's one of the things that makes me extremely skeptical of the entire narrative. It's like two things. The left will sacrifice the poor to save the planet.
It will never be solved, but that doesn't mean we can't help with it. We can't still try to feed the poor and clothe the naked. What the heck does the Bible say? Feed the floor. Don't feed the floor. Feed the poor. Shelter the, whatever. We could do that stuff. We could make it happen. But these dang UN commies run the world. And so we can't do it the right way. But yes, there will always be poor because there's lazy people. There will always be lazy people. There's always going to be people who don't want to work and they don't want to suffer a little bit to they're going to take everything the government offers. The government offers you free food, they're going to take it. The government offers you free stuff, they're going to take it. Government offers you drugs, you're going to take it. Everything the government offers, they're going to take it. And they're just going to want more free stuff and they're not going to want to do anything. So that's why there's always going to be poor. There's always going to be lazy people and there's always going to be what's the word? Like people, like actual physically they can't work and they're going to be poor. We can make a way for people. What is the word I'm looking for? Somebody who like can't walk, incapable of working. You know what I'm talking about? Infirm. You know what I'm talking about. But and we can find a way to house them, but they're not going to have nice stuff. They're going to be poor. And that's just part of life. And then there's going to be lazy people that are going to be poor.
Planet. And the left will deindustrialize even at the nuclear level, despite the fact that it devastates the poor. And that's even worse because if you devastate the poor and you force them into a short-term orientation, in any given country where starvation beckons, for example, they will cut down all the trees and they will kill down all the animals and they will destroy the ecosphere. And so even by the standards of the people who are pushing the carbon dioxide externality
And that's why there's a lot of desert in Africa.
Control, all the consequences of that doctrine appear to me to be
Disabled, handicapped, unwalkables, disabled. Yeah.
Principles.
I should have looked at the chat. Chat was helping me out. Disabled, the unwalkables, the handicapped, the disabled. I wanted to say a different word than disabled, but yeah, that works. I was thinking infirm, incapacitated. Maybe that's what I was looking for. I think that's what I was looking for. People who are incapacitated. They don't have the capacity to work. I think that's the one I was looking for.
We're trying to fix the environment. Well, boys and girls, doesn't look like it's working. All you've managed to do is make energy 5 times as expensive and more polluting. You were wrong. That didn't work. And I can't understand. You can help me. That's why you're here today talking to me. I can't understand how the left can support this.
Just one quick thing. Let's say that everything you've said is true. What do you think is the plan then? What is the goal? What is the drive? Like, why push obviously horrible ideas for the planet and the poor?
That's a good question. That's a good question.
Well, because
I'm not even going to get through this whole thing. We're gonna have to finish watching this at the beginning of the Friday night stream tomorrow night. So I'm not even going to get through this whole thing. What the heck? That means I'm not going to listen to it at work.
you're positing it, right? So what do you think is the driver goal?
Well, I listen to what people say.
Huh.
Here's the most terrible thing they say.
I believe that. I
There are
believe
too
that.
many people
Latina
on the
Cal.
planet. Okay, so who says that? I've heard people say that for 30 years. Perfectly ordinary, compassionate people. Well, there's too many people on the planet. And I think, well, for me, that's like hearing Satan himself take possession of their spine and move their mouth. It's like, okay, who are these excess people that you're so concerned about? And exactly who has to go? And when? And why? And how? And who's going to make that decision? And even if you're not consciously aiming at that.
Yeah, Latina, I believe that. And I believe that used to be a fertile valley. Now it's all desert. It used to be a fertile valley, but kings and pharaohs, overreached their power and they overfarmed stuff. They didn't have fossil fuels. They didn't have nuclear energy yet, so they overfarmed because I think that all used to be like rainforest. So when they built those pyramids, the behemoths, which was the king of man, which was a grass eater, basically a brontosaurus that they had trained to haul large rocks, they built those pyramids in more of a lush environment, and there was grass. But then as the people grew and they had a lot of slaves, they had like millions of slaves, the pharaohs and stuff, they the dinosaurs died out first because they need a lot of grass and they were eating a lot of grass. And so then they die out. And then the pharaoh and then the people ate up all the stuff and they shut off the rivers and then it dried up and now it's a desert. I think that area used to be much more lush. Also, there's a place in the Grand Canyon that looks like a dang sphinx. And they found records of Egyptian stuff in the Grand Canyon. So what if there were multiple of these locations, like the Mayan pyramids, all these pyramids? I think I talked about this when I did my pyramid show, how the fascinating thing about pyramids is not that they're some crazy to build structure. There's lots of ways they could have built the pyramids, right? Probably from the bottom up. I would guess that was how they did it. But what's crazy is that they're aligned with like electronic fields and stuff. So then you get into some ancient alien stuff. Is Earth like a beacon in space for some aliens? I don't know. But I know where all the pyramids are in places where there might have been pyramids, like the Grand Canyon, the Mayan pyramids. There's some underwater locations where there might be some pyramids that were underwater. We don't even know about that. We don't even know about under the water. They might have some dang pyramids under the ice in Antarctica. Maybe that's why we can't go to Antarctica. Not because of flat Earth, but because there's some crazy pyramids or some tunnels to Agartha or some sort of alien spacecraft there. And if I saw this stuff, it would make me question Jesus. That's why I don't believe in it. But it is interesting to think about.
You are the one who uttered the words. You're the ones who muttered the phrase. What makes you think that the thing that possessed you to make
Africa
you utter
been
that
getting
words
boned
isn't
through
aiming
all
at
of history.
exactly what you just declared? And so that's a terrible vision. But when you look at what happens in genocidal societies, and they emerge with fair regularity, and usually with a utopian vision at hand, the consequence is the mass destruction of millions of people. So why should
I do fuck with Pangea. And I don't fuck with the war. Do you fuck with the war? You don't be eating the meat. You just be wearing this shit. That's barbaric as shit. No, I love Pangea. I know about Pangea. Don't even question Mia. Now, see, that could have been what could have happened is they built the pyramids in these locations around the Tower of Babel that was in the center near the Garden of Eden and Babylon and Egypt and all that stuff. And then they built these pyramids along the outskirts. Then the flood comes and Pangea happens and everything drifts apart equally. And then now we have a network of pyramids all around the world. Bum, bum, bum. And they were all made by freaking dinosaurs, bro. She kept him motivated, stay alive, so he could clap them cheeks. Dead Job, I've only seen that movie once, and I don't remember much of it. Which movie? Forrest Gump? What? You should probably watch it again. No, Jenny was not a hero. Jenny was a zero.
assume that something horrible isn't lurking like that right now, especially given that we have pushed a few 100 million of people back
Okay, I gotta
into
watch
absolute
this.
poverty when we were doing a pretty damn good job of getting rid of that. And I just don't understand what's happening in Germany or in the UK. Like, it's insane.
No, she's not.
Like, look, man, if they would have got...
Are you gonna try to say... You should save this for Friday night, Daddy Joe. But are you gonna try to say that by Ginny leading Forrest on, that drove him to do all the things that he did? Because every situation he was either running to or from Jenny or trying to do something. Jenny left, I'm going to go to the war. Jenny left, I'm going to start running. Jenny left, I'm going to play ping pong. Is that what you're trying to say? Is that your argument? Because I think you might be onto something. but no, Jenny's not a hero. She's a zero.
Rid of the nuclear plants and made energy 5 times as expensive.
What's up, 6?
And the consequence would have been they weren't burning lignite coal as a backup, and their unit production of energy, of pollution per unit of energy had plummeted. You could say, well, look, we
aggressive
hurt a lot of
posture,
poor
Dr.
people,
Peterson.
but at
Aggressive
least the air's
posture.
cleaner. It's like, no, air's worse and everyone's poorer. So explain to me how the hell the left can be anti-nuclear.
Okay.
I don't understand it at all.
Gotcha. All right. This is something that I brought up earlier that is concerning to me. I feel like when people get political beliefs, I feel like what happens is, what we think happens, what we'd hope happen is you have some moral or philosophical underpinning. And then from there, you combine this with some epistemic understanding of the world. And then you combine these two things, you engage in some form of analysis. And through your moral
it'd be
view,
nice if that was true.
Yeah, you start to apply like prescriptions. So maybe I'm religious, maybe I analyze society and I see that particular TV shows lead to premarital sex. So my societal prescription is we should ban these TV shows, right? Ideally, this is how you would imagine this process works. What I find happens, unfortunately, all too often is what people do is they join social groups. And then with those social groups, they inherit something that I call like a constellation of beliefs. And this constellation of beliefs, instead of rationally building on each of these, you basically get this like Jenga tower that is like floating over a table, and every block is like supporting itself, and no real part of the tower can be addressed because if you pull out one piece, it all falls apart. So people become like very stuck in all of this combined constellation stuff, and none of it is really given like any analysis, and you can't really push anybody from one way or another in terms of like reevaluating any of the beliefs that are part of this constellation. I wish I would have.
That's good. That's fine. That's right.
Sleep is the foundation of our mental and physical health. You must have a
So she has AIDS. Big deal. Who doesn't? No, you aren't right on that. No, that's not right at all. I don't think she was all good for Forrest, but her behavior is excusable, in my opinion. Excusable? It's not excusable. She can be forgiven, but it's not excusable. You go, no, you don't excuse it. But how is she a hero? What did she do that was heroic? She got banged at a Black Panther rally. She did some acid. She ran away from. She hated her father. She ran away from a good man. She probably had a train ran on her at a dang rally somewhere. No, she got AIDS. Then she takes and she messed up her roommate's blanket. She didn't even care about her roommate's blanket. I think I ruined your roommate's blanket.
There are models now of cognitive processing, belief system processing that make the technical.
Then she sleeps with him, finally gets pregnant. I got that bitch pregnant. Unforgivable. Jenny was unforgivable. Jenny was the first unforgivable.
Claim that what a belief system does is constrain entropy.
Sure, that's not surprising at all to me. Yeah.
So, and now the signal for released entropy, which would be a consequence of, say, violated fundamental beliefs, is a radical increase in anxiety, right? And a decrease in the possibility of positive emotion. And so people will struggle very hard against that, which is exactly the phenomena that you're describing. Yeah. Okay, I agree with what you said. Although,
so here's my
so I'm not sure why it's relevant to the issue I was pursuing.
I'm getting.
Fine. Yeah.
Here's my issue. Okay, so when I'm trying to evaluate a situation, I like to think that I have I've got some insulation from the effects of what liberals think or what conservatives think, is because on my platform, I don't necessarily have an allegiance to a particular political ideology. Like right now, I'm like center left to progressive, but I break really hard from progressives on certain issues. I think Kyle Rittenhouse is in the right. I think basically everything you guys are doing with indigenous people is insane, including.
You didn't think Kyle Rittenhouse was in the right. Well, I'm pretty sure he came out against Kyle Rittenhouse at first, and then once the trial happened, then he was like, okay, Kyle Rittenhouse was right.
Including the complete mass grave hoax. I think that I'm a big supporter.
I could be wrong about that. He might have always been, because I know he's pro-gun. He likes guns. And that's why I've said before, guns are south. Guns are a libertarian thing. They're not a left or right thing. There's far left people who love guns, and there's far right people who love guns.
The Second Amendment. I have beliefs where I can break from my side, pretty hardcore, because I am not like allegiant to certain political ideology. One thing that worries me with this constellation of beliefs thing is that sometimes when it comes to evaluating a particular policy or a particular problem, I feel like it's part of the constellation, and sometimes it inhibits people from like taking a step back and reasonably thinking about the issue. So when we're talking about climate change, you mentioned the WEF sacrificing tons of people, the UN, global elites, 5 times energy costs in Germany, genocidal people. I feel like this is part of like a whole thing where it's like, okay, well, let's take a quick step back and let's just like think rationally about this particular issue for one moment. Okay.
Well, you asked me what the motivation for anti-poor policies might be, so that's why I was trying
I
to flesh
did,
that out.
but I got all of those things before I even asked that question. Because I think it's totally possible that somebody might say, okay, well, when you put carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, it seems to cause an increase in surface temperatures. This has been happening from about the 1800s. And as we've started to track surface temperatures, whether the thermometer is on top of the Empire State Building or in the middle of a field, it seems like there's an average rise in temperatures. And people all around the world are observing this. In some places more than others. If you live in Seattle and 20 years ago, your apartment building wasn't built with.
This is why I don't do numbers. So I think it's 1880s is when they first started keeping track of this climate stuff. And I said 1980. So I said 40 years. So 140 years. Still, the point stands, and I made it before Jordan Peterson made it, that's from Destiny. If you're not a young earther, then you believe Earth was what? At least 1 million, 1 billion, 10 billion years old. How old's the Earth? That's still just a hair of a fraction of a tiny piece.
With air conditioner units, you feel that now. If you live in a place in London and you've never had an air conditioner before, now that's not acceptable. I think that people on the ground can see that there are changes. And I think that scientists, when they look in labs, can see changes. It might be that some models aren't precise enough. And it might be that for reasons we don't even understand.
Well, the economic models certainly aren't precise enough.
Sure, maybe that might be true.
Maybe. They can't even use them to predict the price of a single stock for 6 months. The economic models are not sufficiently accurate to calculate out the consequences of climate change over a century. Not in the least.
I like the comparison because economic models can't predict individual stocks, but they do predict the rough rise of the market. If you invest in the S&P 500, you get
cataclysmic collapse.
Nope. Even with the cataclysmic collapse accounted for, you're going to see about 7% returns on average with inflation over long periods of time.
I wouldn't call an average a very sophisticated model analogous to climate change.
That's the difference between climate and weather, though, right? Is that climate isn't going to tell you what the temperature is on a given day, but it might tell you the average surface temperature over a period of 1 year or 10 years. And then that's the difference between climate and weather. That's the difference between like the market and the stock.
Difference.
It is a hypothetical, but again, we're seeing more and more and more data every single year that things are getting hotter and hotter.
Let's jump out of our cloud of presuppositions for a minute.
Sure.
Now, one of the things that...
Before we do that, actually, because I don't want to say, there are some things that we've gotten as a result of investing in green energy that have been good. So for instance, the power of solar energy has dropped dramatically in the United States, faster than anybody thought possible, such that solar energy is like competitive or beating fossil fuels in certain areas. As long as you can set the solar panels up, you're literally beating fossil fuels.
And as long as the sun is shining.
Well, it still is. We're not a nuclear winter yet. So.
But it isn't when it's cloudy, and
that's why I said depending on where you live. There are places,
right.
equatorial places. If you're trying to set up a solar panel in Seattle, you might not have as much luck, or New York City might not have as much, or in Germany. True.
Or there are also, Europe, I think, or in Canada.
There are also other issues that are coming up that I think are
or anywhere north of the equator past a certain point. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah. Destiny says solar is great. He says, well, what if the sun's not shining? Well, the sun's still there. And then Jordan says, oh, that was funny. That was funny. He says, what if it's cloudy? What if it's raining? What if it's winter? What if it's a foggy day? What if you live north of this certain point? What if you live in Dutch or Germany? I took German class and we watched videos from Germany. And it's just groggy. England is just groggy. It's just groggy all the time, Destiny. Tell me about your solar power in a groggy place.
Obfuscating our ability to evaluate what's being caused by green energy versus not. When we look at energy increases in Germany, I think there's a similar constellation around nuclear energy, for instance. People don't want nuclear energy because they think of nukes, and they think of nuclear meltdowns, and they think of Chernobyl, and they think of Fukushima, and they think of atomic bombs, and that's it. And that's stupid. And I agree with you. But nuclear energy is a totally viable alternative to other forms of fossil
Then why
fuels.
does the radical left oppose it? You think it's just this
for the same reason the right opposes vaccines, because it sounds scary and it's a big thing and they don't trust it. It comes from
the
big
right has a reason to distrust vaccines in the aftermath of the COVID debacle.
Well,
because they were imposed by force, and that was a very
you get to
bad
choose
idea.
if you have a nuclear power plant. That's imposed by force too, no? You don't get to choose where your energy comes from. If you live in a country, you turn the light switch and hopefully you don't have a Chernobyl that melts down in your particular town, right?
Well, you get to choose it because you can buy it or not.
Well,
That's a choice.
It does, but
Nobody had a choice with the vaccines.
Nobody had a choice whether or not they lived near Chernobyl or not. Nobody has a choice.
Sure,
There's a nuclear power plant.
Away.
Well, how realistic is it to move?
I recently joined forces with the Daily Wire.
They could move away, and I bet you whoever built the nuclear company would have some sort of rebate or something where if you sell your house and move, they give you some sort of bonus because you don't want to live within a certain radius of the nuclear factory because there's a risk of a reactor explosion that could take out houses in this radius and damage people. So if you're in this area and you want to move, we'll give you some sort of incentive if you want to, or you could just live there. I'd live right next to the nuclear factory. I'd take my kids out to play in the sludge.
Like 500 miles. That's like telling conservatives when Biden tried to do the OSHA mandate for vaccines, you can just get a different job, right?
I don't want to debate about whether or not large nuclear power plants are frightening. They are.
Sure. Okay.
And there are technologies now where that's not a problem. So I think that's a counterproductive place for our discussion to go, because I also understand why people are afraid of it. But what I don't understand, for example, is why the Germans shut down their nuclear power plants and the Californians are thinking and doing the same thing when they have to import power from France anyways. Like, it's complete.
Or burn coal, which is a million times worse.
Not just coal, lignite.
Yeah.
Right. And then with regards to these renewable power sources, they have a number of problems. One is they're not energy dense. They require tremendous infrastructure to produce. They might be renewable at the energy level, but they're not renewable at the raw materials level. So that's a complete bloody lie. They're insanely variable in their power production. And because of that, you have to have a backup system, and the backup system has to be reliable without variability. And that means if you have a renewable grid, you have to have a parallel fossil fuel or coal grid to back it up when the sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow, which is unfortunately very, very frequently. And so, again, and I'm not going to say there's no place for renewable energy like solar and wind, because maybe there are specific niche locales where those are useful. But the logical, antidote to the problem of reliability, if we're concerned about carbon, but we're really not, would be to use nuclear. And the Greens haven't been flying their bloody flags for 30 years saying, well, we could use fossil fuels for fertilizer and feed people, and we could use nuclear power to drive energy costs down in a carbon dioxide-free manner. That seems pretty bloody self-evident to me. And so then it brings up this other mystery that we were talking about earlier. What's the impetus behind all this? because the cover story is, oh, we care about carbon dioxide, which I don't think they
Damn.
do, especially given.
Did Kermit just do Miss Piggy's voice? What the heck? We care about carbon dioxide. Listen, Miss Piggy. Sometimes you really need to understand carbon dioxide because the world is supposed to be more green. And it's not easy being green. We need to really break down why the carbon emissions are messing up the greenness, Miss Piggy. Oh, Kirby! Please tell me more about nuclear energy.
The willingness to sacrifice the poor. It makes no sense to me. And I think it's relevant to the issue you brought up, which is that people have these constellations of ideas, and there's a driving force in the midst of them, so to speak. They're not necessarily aware of what that driving force is.
Isn't it more likely that people are either misinformed or misguided than people are legitimately trying to depopulate the planet?
Look, misinformed and ignorant, that's plenty relevant and worth considering. And stupidity is always a better explanation than malevolence. But malevolence is also an explanation. And no, I don't think it's a better explanation because...
Why would we waste so much money sending food aid, having Bush do, programs through Africa for AIDS, having other billionaires like Bill Gates invest so much money in anti-malarial stuff? Like, why would all the global elites be so invested in helping and killing the people here at the same time?
Well, some of it's confusion.
Potato power.
And some of it's the fact, many things can be happening simultaneously with a fair bit of internal paradox because people just don't know which way is up often. But the problem with the argument, okay, so you tell me what you think about this. So, Hitler's cover story was that he wanted to make the glorious Third Reich and elevate the Germans to the highest possible status for the longest possible period.
As soon as Joedan Peterson said Hitler, Destiny drew a swastika on his piece of paper. Watch.
About this. So, Hitler's cover story was that he wanted to make the glorious Third Reich and elevate the Germans to the highest possible status for the longest possible period of time. Okay, but that wasn't the outcome. The outcome was that Hitler shot himself through the head after he married his wife, who died from
allegedly
the same day
in
the bunker underneath Berlin while Europe was in flames. Well, he was insisting that the Germans deserved exactly what they got because they weren't the noble.
He went to damn Argentina through an underwater Agartha tunnel.
People he thought they were. And then you might say, well, Hitler's plans collapsed in flames, and wasn't that a catastrophe? Or you could say that was exactly what he was aiming for from the beginning, because he was brutally resentful and miserable right from the time he was, a rejected artist at the age of 16. And so he was working, or something was working within him, and something that might be regarded as demonic, whose end goal was precisely what it attained, which was the devastation of hundreds of millions of people, and Europe left in a smoking ruin. And the cover story was the Grand Third Reich. And so there's no reason at all to assume that we're not in exactly the same situation right now.
I think there's a great reason to assume. I think that Hitler's motives and everything that he was trying to do wasn't a secret. I don't think that anybody had to guess that he was incredibly anti-Semitic, that his Aryan supremacy was going to lead to the destruction and the murder of so many different people in concentration camps. None of this was a secret. It's not like he was hiding it.
He hid a lot of it.
He tried to maybe hide the death camps, but nobody in Germany was wondering, wow, crazy that pogroms are happening against Jewish people. That's so crazy. Or wow, they're all being shipped to mainly the Jews to camps to work. That's kind of interesting. Or wow, he talks about this a lot in Mein Kampf, but maybe it's just a coincidence. I don't think you can compare Hitler to people that are worried about climate change. The worry that I have here is because we're
why not?
People thought people in Germany.
Why not? Epic. Let's go.
Thought Hitler was perfectly motivated by the highest of benevolent.
If I were to take this standard of evidence and apply this lens of analysis, couldn't I say the exact same thing about the conservative constellation of belief? They don't want to intervene anywhere in the world because they don't care about the problems there. They're anti-immigration because they hate brown people. Trump wanted to ban Muslims from coming to the United States because he's xenophobic. Conservatives don't want to have taxes to help the poor because they want homeless people to starve and die in the winter. I feel like
some of that's true. And yes, you can adopt that criticism. I think the difference with regards especially to the libertarian side of the conservative enterprise, but also to some degree to the conservative enterprise, is they're not building a central gigantic organization to put forward this particular utopian claim. And so even if the conservatives are as morally addled as the leftists, and to some degree that might...
He's right about that. We're not doing anything.
be true. They're not organized with the same gigantism in mind. And so they're not as dangerous at the moment. Now, they could well be, and they have been in the past, but at the moment they're not. And so, of course, you can be skeptical.
And that's why the left loves the libertarians, because the libertarians are even do nothing more than the conservatives. Like that's why the left loves, and that's why they back them financially. CNN loves the libertarians. They love the Joe Jorgensens and the Rand Pauls and the guys that say we're going to legalize pot and secure gun rights. They love those guys.
Skeptical about people's motivations when they're brandishing the moral flag.
Why would we say that they're not as concerned about the gigantism? I feel like everybody is when it's a particular thing that they care about.
You mean whether they would be inclined in that direction?
For sure. That conservatives wield the power of the government whenever they feel they need to, just as liberals do, right? Conservatives were very happy to see, for instance, abortion was brought back as a state-regulated thing.
That's a good objection. I think that you're correct in your assumption that once people identify a core area of concern, they're going to be motivated to seek power to implement that concern.
I think cancel culture is a good idea too. I think conservatives prior to the 2000s, if they could censor everything related to either LGBT stuff or weird musical stuff,
Kermit rode a skateboard.
Conservatives would do it. But now that you see that like liberals and progressives are kind of wielding that corporate hammer, now conservatives are very much, well, hold on, we need freedom of speech, we need to platform everybody. And now progressives are like, well, hold on, maybe we shouldn't platform people.
I've got no disagreement with those things that you said, and I have no disagreement about your proposition that people will seek power to impose their central doctrine. Okay, so then you might say, and so we can have a very serious conversation about that. What do we have that ameliorates that tendency?
In the United States, we've got hopefully a form of decentralized government. I can't speak to Canada as much, but
yes, that's true. So that's one of the institutional protections against that, because what that does is put various forms of power striving in conflict with one another.
There's a Kermit on a skateboard doing a kickflip sticker.
Right, and so that's a very intelligent solution. But then there are psychological and philosophical solutions as well. And one of them might be that you abjure the use of power, right, as a principle. And so, and this is one of the things that was done very badly during the COVID era, let's say, because the rule should be something like...
I'm low. I've actually been wanting to do... I might stream it. I wanted to start doing like 10 minutes a day typing with a program on the computer that teaches you how to type. I've been wanting to do that for a while, and I got a keyboard now. I was going to wait till I got a good keyboard. I got a good keyboard, and I haven't done it yet. But I got to end the stream soon. We're going to watch for like 10 more minutes. We're going to have to finish this tomorrow. We'll finish it, and then I'll open the Discord tomorrow.
You don't get to impose your solution on people using compulsion and force. There's a doctrine there, which is any policy that requires compulsion and force is to be looked upon with extreme skepticism. Now, it's tricky because now and then you have to deal with psychopaths.
It's tricky.
Respond to anything but force.
Rock around and
so there's an exception there that always has to be made, and it's a very tricky exception. But look, let me tell you a story, and you tell me what you think about this, because I think it's very relevant to the concern that you just expressed, and I don't believe that the conservatives are necessarily any less tempted by the calling of power than the leftists.
Wielding the power.
That's going to vary from situation to situation. Though I would say probably overall in the 20th century, the leftists have the worst record in terms of sheer numbers of people killed.
So, I mean, it depends on how we're quantifying
not
that.
Really. Okay, we'll just quantify sure. Mao. How's that? Direct death of 100 million people. So, that's a pretty stark fact. And if we're going to argue about that, well, then we're really not going to get anywhere. So,
I'm not disagreeing that the Holodomor happened as well. The Soviet Union and China were horrible. I'm not going to.
But the Soviet Union was communist. That's not the right. That's the left.
Yeah, of course.
It's a war of.
I'm just saying it.
That's what Destiny was agreeing. So if we take Russia, we take Mao, we take Stalin, we take the commies. There's way more deaths than it, and also Also, I think that I could debate with somebody pretty well. I know this argument pretty well. Well, I'd have to refresh my memory on it, but I think it's pretty clear that Hitler was on the left. Hitler was not a right-wing guy. He was authoritarian, yes, but he was not a right-wing guy. He was not a capitalist. He was more socialist than capitalist. It was the National Socialist Party. He was very nationalist, and nationalism pulls you to the right. But he was not really a nationalist. He was an imperialist. Well, imperialists can come from capitalism, but imperialism could also come from extreme communism and socialism. So I think Hitler was just to the left of center. I think Hitler was a far authoritarian, just to the left of center. They'll usually put him on the right side, authoritarian. But I think Hitler was on the left too. So Hitler, Stalin, Mao, everybody. They killed way more people than anybody. Christians, way more than Christians. They'll be like, Christians started all the war. Christians started so many wars. No, commies started the most wars. Commies killed. Maybe we started wars, but they killed the most people. They just killed people. We started a war because maybe there's something worth fighting for. You know? They just kill people.
For World War II, it depends on how much you attribute the war deaths to Nazi Germany, et cetera, et cetera. But sure, like, largely speaking, I don't think that the left beat the right because the right wasn't trying. I don't think it's because Hitler's lack of trying led him to kill less people than who ended up dying during the Great Leap Forward or during the industrialization of the Soviet
Yes,
Union.
well, I also think it's an open question still to what degree Hitler's policies were right-wing versus left-wing, and no one's done the analysis properly yet to determine that.
Well, what do we
Because
consider?
it was a national socialist movement for a reason, and the socialist part of it wasn't accidental.
Well, but there was
we know what it is,
cooperatively
guys.
formed businesses that were
get
owned
the
by all
joke.
the people for the people and distributed to the people. And I don't think redistribution was high on Hitler's list of
That's
things
true.
to do for.
That's true. It was
But
a
I do
strange
think that-
mix of totalitarian policy.
I don't think it was a strange mix. I think it was a bid to appeal to mid-left and center-left, the KPD and the German Socialist Party by calling themselves National Socialists. I think it was very much like.
Oh, okay. I've never heard that argument before. So Destiny just gave me the only good argument I've heard against that. He's saying that the reason they called it the National Socialist Party was to appeal to the socialist left. Which, that's a good argument. That's a good point. That makes sense. And I don't know enough about Hitler. I've never read Mein Kampf. I'd like to someday, but could that get me in trouble, or am I not allowed to read that book? But I know a decent. I don't know a whole lot, but
an authoritarian, ultra-nationalist regime that pretty squarely fits with. People get mad if you call something far right or far left because they have an attachment
Well,
to terms,
one of the things I would have done if I would have been able to hang on to my professorship at the University of Toronto would have been to extract out a random sample of Nazi policies and strip them of markers of their origin,
Neil.
and present them to
Neil
a set
wins.
of people with conservative or leftist beliefs and see who agreed with them more. And that analysis has never been done as far as I know. So we actually don't know. And we could know if the social scientists would do their bloody job, which they don't, generally speaking. That's something we could know. We could probably use the AI systems we have now, the large language models, to determine to what degree left and right beliefs intermingled in the rise of National Socialism. So that's all technically possible. So, and it hasn't been done, so it's a matter of opinion.
Sure.
So,
I don't necessarily disagree. That's something you could do.
Okay, I was going to tell you this story. Okay, well, this has to do with the use of power. So I spent a time with a group of scholars putting and analyzing the Exodus story, an Exodus seminar recently. And so the Exodus story is a very interesting story because it's what would you say? It's an analysis of the central tendency of movement away from tyranny and slavery. That's a good way of thinking about it. So,
okay, we're gonna end here. So we're at 109. 109 when he starts talking about the Exodus thing. The timestamp is Moses in the desert. So wow, I only got through an hour of that in 3 hours, 2 hours. 7, 8, 9, 2 hours. I got through an hour of video. Oh, that's good. That means half me, half the video. That's good. That's good. I always hated reaction content. I'm like anti-reaction content. But I don't know. If I'm gonna watch this video, I'd rather just sit and watch it on stream. There's a bunch of other ones I listen to when I'm working, but anyway. Anyway, leftover version of earlier Germany. Female Soviet snipers were lurking in the Krauts in Stalingrad. Who knew? This dude don't even look at the flame when he's sparking. What a psycho. Probably sleeps in jeans too. Only sometimes. Only sometimes. Not frequently, but occasionally. I do sleep in jeans sometimes. Sometimes. Fake ass Moses traitor. How is he fake or is he a traitor? Was he real or was he a fake person? So tomorrow, I'll finish watching this, and then I'll open the Discord for the snore stream. And Freddie, if you jump in first, then I'll mute Buff when he comes in, and I'll tell him new rule is. I don't know what do you want me to do? I'm not gonna kick him out. What the heck? What the heck? Sometimes I would rather talk to Freddie than Buff, though. So, just saying. I don't think he's a cop, though. Watch 3 men, 1 hammer on stream? No, that sounds horrible. I probably should not do that. All right. Let's close this. Goodbye, Kermit. Good night, Kermit. Kermit, good night. Good night, Miss Piggy. You know, every now and then, I just think, wouldn't it be great if the world was full of frogs? Wouldn't it be great if we could just all drop logs? But some of us, I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. Oh man, I gotta go, guys. I gotta go. I gotta drink some coffee, sober up. 2 beers deep. I gotta go to work in an hour. So, good night, y'all. God bless. I'll see you tomorrow. Friday night snore stream. We'll see how late it goes.